Welcome to Worlds Without Warning. I'm Jon Negroni, and this is where stories come alive through the voices of their creators. Each week, we bring you original short fiction from etc. Stories that surprise, challenge, and maybe change the way you see the world, just a little bit. These are tales that, yes, we're going to be reading aloud, but they're also stories shared by the people who dreamed them up, complete with the inspiration and insights that brought them to life. For our very first episode, we have a story that asks a very simple question. What if the universe really did tie you to your soulmate with an invisible thread? And what if you discovered this connection was happening almost everywhere? Soulmate Season is a speculative fiction piece with a little bit of romantic drama that I wrote after becoming kind of fascinated by an ancient belief that we're all connected to our destined person by an invisible red cord. I'm going to read the story for you, and afterward, I'm going to share my author's notes. Just a few things about the piece that explain where it came from, why I wrote it, and anything else that you might find interesting. But for now, here is Soulmate Season. Soulmate Season. Every 10 years, the threads appear. Some people follow them right to their soulmate. Some people don't. Written by Jon Negroni, narrated by Jon Negroni. The threads appeared at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning while Cleo was scraping burnt oatmeal from the bottom of her saucepan. She noticed it first in her peripheral vision, a thin red line stretching from somewhere near her sternum, threading through the kitchen window and disappearing into the Houston fog. Shit. She turned off the faucet. The line pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady glow. Thread Week. She'd forgotten. The city had been preparing for months. Billboards advertised thread-ready makeovers and destiny dating prep. Her neighbor, Mrs. Torres, had spent 3 weeks power washing her driveway in case her soulmate turned out to be the mailman. Cleo had planned to work through it, same as last time. The threads only showed up for 1 week every 10 years, and it didn't work on anyone younger than 20 or so. She touched her chest where the thread emerged. Warm, slightly sticky, like fresh paint, but her hand could go right through it. It was also glowing, and glowing meant her soulmate wasn't far away this time. He or she might even be local. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Margot. OMG, mine showed up! Leads to the Barnes & Noble in River Oaks, buying lingerie. Jesus. Cleo set the phone face down and returned to the oatmeal situation. Definitely more of a lost cause at this point. The thread bobbed as she moved, never taut, but never slack. She tried to ignore it while she ate yesterday's leftover pad thai for breakfast, but the darn thing glowed brighter every time she looked away. By 8:15, she'd given up pretending to check emails. The thread led south toward downtown, which meant either the museum district or the medical center. Maybe her soulmate was a doctor, or a security guard, or someone visiting their dying grandmother. She put on her good jeans and drove to work anyway. The marketing firm occupied the 7th floor of a glass tower that reflected the morning sun in sheets of amber. Cleo's cubicle faced east, and by 9:30, the thread was casting a faint red shadow across her computer screen. Holy shit, Cleo! Bev from Accounts Receivable leaned over the partition. Look at that thing. It's like a fiber optic cable with a flashlight inside it. It's just Thread Week, Cleo said. Just Thread Week? Honey, I've been married to the same man for 15 years, and I would trade him for a ham sandwich if my thread showed up pointing somewhere else. Bev squinted at the line. Where's it go? I haven't followed it. What do you mean you haven't followed it? Cleo shrugged. I'm busy. That was only somewhat true. She was researching organic dog food brands for a client who sold pet insurance, which was the kind of work that could absorb 3 hours or 30 minutes, depending on how badly you wanted to avoid your actual life. Girl. Bev sat on the edge of Cleo's desk. My daughter's 22, and she's been planning her Thread Week strategy since she was 16. Vision boards, workout routines. She learned to make souffle in case her person turns out to be French and she has to catch a flight. What if her person turns out to be lactose intolerant? Then she'll learn to make something else. Bev stood up. Point is, you don't just ignore the thread. That's like ignoring a winning lottery ticket. Maybe I don't want to win the lottery. Bev stared at her for a long moment. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week. At lunch, Cleo walked to the food truck plaza 3 blocks south. The thread led her past the Vietnamese place, past the fusion taco stand, all the way to a coffee cart run by a guy named Hollis who made pour-overs that tasted like burnt pencil shavings. The thread ended at a man sitting alone at one of the plastic tables. He was maybe 35, wearing a faded Patagonia shirt and reading a paperback copy of The Overstory. His dark hair curled at the edges, and he had a face that looked worried, even when relaxed. His thread emerged from his chest in a thin red line that connected directly to hers. Cleo bought a cup of coffee she didn't want and sat down at the next table. The man looked up from his book. Weird week, right? Yeah. She stirred sugar into her coffee. You come here a lot? Every Tuesday. You? First time. Ah. He closed the book, keeping his finger on the page. So, this is awkward. Little bit. They sat in silence for a moment. The thread between them hummed faintly, like a power line. I'm Kieran, he said finally. Cleo. Nice to meet you, Cleo. He paused. Weird, circumstances. The weirdest. He was wearing a wedding ring. Thin gold band, slightly tarnished. Cleo felt a cold breeze whip through her that had nothing to do with weather. So, she said. Married? Engaged. Kieran twisted the ring around his finger. 6 months now. Wedding's in October. She thought this would help for Thread Week. Just in case, I guess. Congratulations. Thanks. He looked at the thread connecting them. This is really f***ing inconvenient. Cleo laughed before she could stop herself. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, what are the odds? I've lived in Houston for 8 years. I eat lunch at this exact spot every Tuesday, and my cosmic soulmate apparently lives right around the corner. Murphy's Law. Exactly. He reopened his book and closed it again. Hey, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you even believe in this stuff? The threads? The soulmate thing? Cleo considered this. I believe in biological imperatives, pheromones, evolutionary compatibility. I think the threads are just a visual representation of something that was always there. Very scientific. I work in marketing. Everything's about psychological manipulation. Right. And what's the thread trying to manipulate you into? She looked at him, really looked. He had good hands, calloused in the right places, a mouth that probably smiled more than it frowned, under normal circumstances. I have no idea, she said. Kieran checked his watch. I should get back to work. Yeah, me too. Neither of them moved. This is stupid, Kieran said. We just met. I don't even know your last name. Valdez. Cleo Valdez. He smiled. I'm Kieran Moss. I'm a public defender. I live in Montrose with my fiancé and a cat named Biscuit. I drink too much coffee and I'm terrible at returning phone calls. Why are you telling me this? Because in about 5 minutes, I'm going to walk back to my office and pretend this never happened. And I figure you should know something real about me first. The thread pulsed brighter. Cleo Valdez, she said. I work for a marketing firm that specializes in insurance companies. I live alone in a studio apartment with very good acoustics and a broken garbage disposal. I haven't been on a date in 8 months, and I'm starting to think I prefer it that way. Why? Because dating is like job interviewing. Everyone's performing the best version of themselves until someone gets hired, and then you find out what they're actually like. And what are you actually like? She stood up, leaving her coffee untouched. I guess you'll never know. Cleo. She turned back. Same time tomorrow? He asked. The thread between them glowed steady and warm. Same time tomorrow, she said. That was Soulmate Season by Jon Negroni, also narrated by me, Jon Negroni. Okay, now I'm going to share some insights about this story, where it came from, what it means to me, all that good stuff. For starters, I have to admit, I actually don't remember when I first heard about the invisible thread theory thing. Something somewhere between a Tumblr post and a friend of a friend's podcast, but I came across it again recently on Instagram, to be clear, and I honestly could not get it out of my head. This idea that the universe ties you to another person and then forces you to figure out the rest on your own. I think that's a pretty wild concept. I think a lot of us, we dream up these kinds of theories because real life is so difficult and theories make them just a little bit easier. For example, there aren't any instructions for finding the person you supposedly belong with, especially when the timing can be a little off, or in this case, way off. And that's pretty much where Soulmate season comes from. I wanted to write a story where the big magical thing happens. The soulmate is confirmed, the thread is glowing, the fate has been delivered, but it's still complicated because it's still inconvenient, it's still a human experience. Cleo, to be fair, is not like me at all. I, Jon Negroni, want to be understood. I want to be seen. But Cleo wants to handle that dog insurance client with as little to do as possible. Then again, I have to admit that there is a version of Cleo that I can relate with. The part of her who wants to earn that closeness and intimacy that everybody's raving about. She doesn't just want to take some predestined shortcut. Now, Kieran, on the other hand, is the person who kind of just stumbles around trying to do the right thing, even when he's not sure what that is. Ultimately, I think he probably makes a wrong decision here and hopefully learns from it. Either way, the thread doesn't care what either of them think. The thread shows up anyway. Life shows up anyway. Honestly, I don't look at this piece as a love story. That's why at the beginning I said it's more of a speculative kind of thing. It's definitely not a rom-com where the two end up together in the end. At least that's how I see it. Cleo still has her life and Kieran has his commitment. In my mind, neither of them show up the next day. But I purposely left that out of the story because I think it's irrelevant. And this ended up turning out to be true because when Soulmate season originally went up on Thursday, July 3rd, I think is when it went live, so many people disagreed with me about this point. And I think that's really cool. And I have to admit too that while I didn't put this in the original author's notes, I don't really believe in soulmates. I've never have. I think the idea of a soulmate is kind of weird. If there is such thing as a soulmate, I think that people can have many of them. And the whole concept of it is very interesting to me to the point where of a lot of the stuff that I have written in general, so stories for etc., short stories for other publications where I've been published, this is the one that the most amount of people have recommended I turn into a larger thing, either a novella or even a novel. And I think it makes sense because this concept does have a lot of legs, and there's so many questions that it brings up about what is a soulmate, and we're imperfect people. So how does that factor in? I think it's a really cool sort of premise, but who knows? I like the story. It's a little bit complicated for me, but I'm just really glad that people got something out of it. And hopefully, if you were listening to this for the first time, hopefully you did too. But thank you so much for listening to my story and my ramblings. If you want to read Soulmate Season along with its original artwork and complete author's notes, head on over to cetera.substack.com. While you're there, explore our archive of surprising fiction and literary tales, speculative stories, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and of course, weird fiction. Next week, we'll be back with another story, maybe another author, and a whole other world that changes without warning. Until then, keep an eye out for those moments when the universe decides to get your attention. You never know what invisible threads might be glowing all around you. This has been Worlds Without Warning. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, the best surprises come from the most unexpected worlds.